Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sotah daf Chet. This is the daf for the first day of Pesach. We're going to start at the bottom of Zayin Amud Bet. Pesach Sameach Lekulam, Chag Kasher v'Sameach. We are going to get started with Im Amra Tohora Ani Ma'alin Ota L'Sha'arei Mizrach. Okay, so if the woman says I'm Tohora, she doesn't admit, then, right, this is a quote from the Mishnah, then we bring her to the Eastern Gate. Okay, where's the Eastern Gate? Again, that's the entrance into the Ezrat Nashim area. To which the Gemara says, what's going on? What do you mean you bring her up? Remember, the whole Harabbayit is built going up, 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 till you get higher into the sanctuary area, right? Everything is, each level is kind of a step up. So it says here, we bring her up to the Sharei Mizrach, to the Eastern Gate. Hatam Kaima, what do you mean? She was already there. She was already in the Lishkat HaGazit, which is right before the entrance by Shar Nikanor, the entrance into the Ezra Yisrael. Pull up a map. Right, again, here's the Shar Mizrach over here, on the eastern side. We go in through the Ezrat Nashim, and then here when you get into the azara is the Lishkat HaGazit. That's where the Sanhedrin is. Okay, that's where she was before in the Lishkat HaGazit. So the question is, how is she possibly going there? To which they say, and that's how could she be going up? She's already in. To which they say, we want to wear her down. We want to try our best to get her as exhausted as possible so that she'll just admit, I did it. Okay, the whole goal, we saw this before, is just to get her to admit what she did. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, this is a braita in Masechet Sanhedrin, that in order to get the witnesses to tell the truth, okay, this is a way of weakening people out so that they end up telling us the truth. Now, the Gemara continues, Sheshan mashkim et hasotot. Okay, that's where the place is, where they do the sotot. Okay, this is, just going back for one quick second to the Mishnah, right? They would bring her to Beit Din HaGadol. That was the beginning. They would threaten her. Then they would say, after they said all those things, then they would say, Ma'alin Ota L'Sha'arei Mizrach, Shal Petach Shar Nikanor, and then they move her. Again, there's a bit of a debate. I didn't get into this, but which exact Shar Mizrach are we talking about? But then they bring her to Shar Nikanor, which is where I showed you before, the entrance to the Ezra Yisrael. So now, right, again, to be clear, because I showed you a few things. So there's the Eastern Gate all the way over here on the end. And then there's the Shar Nikanor, which is here in the middle, between the Ezrat Nashim and the Ezra Yisrael. So now what happens? Bishlama, so now the Gemara says that's where they're mashkim the Sotah. That's where they give them water, meaning they make them drink that potion. Bishlama Sotot tichtiv v'hem mida kohenet ha'isha lefnei Hashem. Okay, by Sotot we understand where they get this from, because it's Hamidas HaKohen Lefnei Hashem. It says exactly Lefnei Hashem. The Mishnah listed a whole bunch of other people. So let's see who else. Mitzora'im Yomi, also by the lepers. It also says it very explicitly in the text. They don't quote you the rest of this pasuk, but it says Otam ve'otam lifnei Hashem petach ol moed. Also before God in the entranceway to the ol moed, the tent where they would meet God, which is basically in the mikdash. It's the entrance at Shar Nikanor. So now they say, Ela yoldot, my timer. What's the reason for the yoldot that are mentioned in the Mishnah? Why women who give birth, why are they there? Never says anywhere Lifnei Hashem. If it's that they have to stand while their sacrifices are being brought, and that's why they stand right there. Remember, until they fulfill their sacrifices, they're not allowed. No one who hasn't fulfilled their sacrifices is allowed to go all the way inside. That's why the Mitzorah, for example, stays outside, and also the Yoled. But now they say, so if it's because her sacrifices are being given and she should be there, well, we don't bring sacrifices for people unless they're there. Right? This isn't like, okay, just send your money and done with it. No, you have to be there. You have to be part of it. Well, then it shouldn't just be Yoldot. It should be Zav, Zava, all those people who are similar to the Yoledet. They should also be. To which the Gemara says, yeah, it's true. Meaning really all of them stand there. It's just they mentioned Yoledet, and they understood that as a catchphrase for all those other types of sacrifices that are similar to the Yoledet. Tanu Rabbanan, another Braita, and Mashkin Shte Sotot Ke'echad. Okay, since we're talking about the process, now we're going to say you don't have two sotot drinking at the same time. This is similar to something we saw in the Mishnah. If she sees her friend withstanding the pressure and not admitting, she'll say, oh, I could withstand the pressure also. Now, we don't know if her friend was innocent or guilty, but we're worried that the second one might be guilty and won't admit because she's going to say, I'm going to stay strong. I'm not going to admit, right? Again, the whole thing is we want to get her to admit what she did wrong. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lo Min Hashem, who said that's not the reason. Ella Amar Ka Ota Levada. It says Ota vehemida kohenet haisha lifnei Hashem, right? And then it says, sorry, I'm finding the pasuk. Sorry, v'hishbia Ota Kohen. The Kohen makes her swear, and etc. And he says to her blah blah blah. So ishbia Ota, specifically her. That's singular, one woman at a time. So he says you don't need the reason of so that she'll admit, and we're worried that she'll stand strong, seeing her friend is standing strong and won't admit. No, just because of the pasuk. So now they're going to do the ping pong, the Tanakama Ktiv Ota, but doesn't it say Ota? So what do you say to that? Tanakama Rabbi Shimon, the Darish Tama Deka. Tanakama really, it's true, it comes from Ota, but he's like Rabbi Shimon who likes to explain the reason for the halacha. So Matam Kama, why does it say Ota and only she herself? Matam Ota Levada. So basically, they don't disagree. They're saying we learned from the same drasha, but we want to tell you what the reason for this is. My benayu. So what's the practical relevance? What's the relevance of this debate? Whether you learn from the pasuk alone or whether you learn the pasuk with the reason. Because once you learn a reason, if the reason's not relevant, then the halacha won't be relevant. If a friend, or some of the commentaries say either one of them, if one of them is all nervous, then rotetet mi mashkin. Sorry, stop. Mikuda, I went too far. If one of them is nervous and is, well, then we're not worried, right? She seems scared by the whole process. If she's scared by the whole process, we're not worried that she's going to all of a sudden be brazen and say, I'm not going to admit when I really want to admit. The fact that she's nervous shows that she's not going to just say, oh, look, let's say it's me who comes in and my friend is already there and she's already standing strong. So if I'm all nervous, I'm not going to be able to stand strong like she is. Or if she's all nervous, then I'm not going to say, oh, look, she's standing strong and not admit it. Right? You can see she's petrified of the whole process, so it won't cause me to act brazen all of a sudden. Now the Gemara asks another question. V'rotetet mi mashkin v'ha. So now you're going to say, according to this, if one of them is very nervous, then you can actually do both at once. But that creates another halachic problem. V'ha enos mitzvot chavilot. You're not allowed to do a mitzvah in bundles. Okay, this, by the way, comes up in Arvei Pesachim. Okay, apropos for Pesach, although it's really a little bit more related to Kiddush and using the same cup, let's say, for two different brachot. Okay, there's a whole thing about that. You can't do mitzvot chavilot. You can't bundle two mitzvahs together. Why not? So Rashi says, chavilot shenir'eh kemisha hayu alav lemasul u'maher lefarek masel. If you try to bundle the mitzvot together, right? Often you try to do two things at a time because you're trying to get rid of them. You're trying to get done with it. It's a burden for you. We don't want mitzvot to seem like they're a burden for you. Other people say it's that we want to make sure that you give each one, it's similar, but there it's kind of the negative, and this is in the positive. We want to make sure you give each mitzvah the time and effort that it deserves. And that might be more applicable for individual mitzvah rather than something someone is doing for someone else. Like here, the Kohen, we're not maybe as worried about that because it's not really the Kohen's mitzvah. But in any case, you don't do two at once, Ditanya, as it says in a Braita. And it says Ditnan, it should be in a Braita, they correct it. אין משכין שתי סוטות כאחד, ואין מתארים שני מצורעים כאחד, ואין רוצים שתי עבדים כאחד, ואין עורפים שתי עגלות כאחד. לפי שאין עושים מצוות חבילות. Here are 4 examples given. You don't have 2 Sotahs drink together. You don't purify 2 mitzoraim at the same time. You don't go through the same purification process at the same time. You don't pierce the ear of 2 Jewish slaves, pierce the ear in order to allow him if he wants to stay after the 6 years are over. If 2 people were murdered and you're going to break the neck of an egel, of a calf, you don't do it in front, both at the same time. And that's all because we don't bundle up mitzvah. So how do we respond then? If that's the nafkamina, then it sounds like you could do two sotot echad. Forget about that, right? Because we're not worried libad gas babadeh, but there seems to be a different reason, which would then preclude us from being able to do this. To which the Gemara answers, Amar Abaye, the Item Rav Kahana. So either Abaye or Rav Kahana answered, Lo kashya, kam b'kohen echad, kam b'shnei kohanim. It all depends how many kohanim there are. If there's one kohen, then no, you can't do it no matter what. But if there's two kohanim, then you don't have to worry about chavilot, because he's not rushing through. There's two different people operating, doing things at the same time. But the problem is that we're worried that one might see the other and have a response. So again, if we're not worried about the response and the fact that she'll all of a sudden be brazen, then it's fine. Continuing now in the process. And now we start to get to tearing her clothes. So where do we get that we tear her clothes? It says, uparat rosh haisha, which is he pulls up her hair covering, but who says he tears her clothes, like it said in the Mishnah? Tanu Rabbanit, uparat rosh haisha. So that sounds like you just uncover her hair. How do we know that you tear her clothes? Talmud lamar ha'isha, because it could have just said uparat rosha. Why does it say rosh ha'isha? So also the woman herself gets uncovered. Im kemata malo uparat rosh. So then why do you say rosh in that pasuk? You could just say uparat ha'isha. We learn that not just do they uncover her hair, which would have been included in uncover the woman, that would include her hair and her clothes, but from here, we learn that he even undoes her braid. The assumption was women also braided their hair. He would undo her braid as well. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im haya liba. So now you remember the Mishnah, it said, im haya liba na'eh lo haya megaleh. She was beautiful, then they wouldn't remove her clothing because it would cause all sorts of issues with the kohanim that were around. So now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda chayish liherhura v'Rabbanan lo chayish. It seems like the rabbis aren't really worried about any improper thoughts the kohanim might have, but Rabbi Yehuda is. Well, that's a bit of a problem. Why? Because they seem to have the exact opposite approaches somewhere else. We're now talking about when someone goes out to be stoned. What do we do with them? Also, their clothes are removed, but the man, we cover him with a small piece in the front to block his privates. The woman you need in the front and in the back. Because both her front and her back is considered erva. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So what do you see here? Rabbi Yehuda is concerned for erva, which, right? He's not so concerned. You'll see why in a minute. He says you just need to put a little thing to cover up the, just the exact area, which is the private parts. Chachamim say when a man gets stoned, we strip him down naked. But when a woman gets stoned, we do not do that. So here you see the rabbis are more concerned by a woman being naked, and Rabbi Yehuda is not as concerned. He just says, cover up a little bit, that's it. And that's the opposite of their opinions here. So first we're going to have an answer specifically only for Rabbi Yehuda. It seems like that's their focus, but after we're going to get back and say, well, what about the rabbis? Amar Rabba, hachatam aman, shematetzeh mi beitin zakait, v'yitkaru ba prechei kuna. Hatam hamistalka. He says very interesting. This woman who's a Sotah maybe will be a Sotah, maybe will not be a Sotah. Maybe it'll be proven that she wasn't guilty at all. And she'll just walk out. And then we have to worry that maybe people have put their eyes on her. But if the woman's about to be stoned, she's leaving this world. So there's no concern. What if anyone's attracted to her? It doesn't matter. She's gone in a few more minutes. So it's not a relevant factor. So that explains Rabbi Yehuda's distinction. And if you want to say, just looking at this beautiful woman might cause them to think about some other woman, well, Rava says, we know the we're only worried about people having thoughts about things they see and not things they don't see. So it doesn't, just because they see this woman doesn't mean they're going to think about some other woman who's not here right now. So Amar Rava. Now Rava gets back and says, Rabbi Yehuda kashya. Rabbanan lo kashya. Okay, so you seem to only be relating to the contradiction within the words of Rabbi Yehuda himself, who by us was concerned about the woman's body, but in the skila case wasn't, and that we resolved. But what, are you not concerned with the contradiction of the rabbis? The rabbi said, when it comes to the woman who's getting stoned, she stays with her clothes on. And when it comes to our woman, right, we don't care that we've taken her clothes off. We don't take them completely off. We saw that in the Mishnah. We'll get back to that soon. Ela amarav, to Rabbi Yehuda lo kashya, Kiddushanin. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda, we've resolved. Moving now to Amud Bet. Derived, nami lo kasha. Hatam amayim mishum v'nivasru kol anashim. Hatam en lecha yisur gadol mizeh. What's their issue? Here, what did we say? V'nivasru kol anashim. We want everybody to see. And that's why the rabbis say that we take her clothes off to make her look really humiliated so that other women will see and learn their lesson. When it comes to the woman who's getting killed, stoned, what more sight is that than a woman getting stoned? You don't need to also strip her naked for people to think, oh my God, what a humiliation. Maybe you'd say, let's just do both. So she'll get stoned and she'll also get stripped down. Well, Amrav, Nachman Amrav, very interesting line. You have to love your friend like yourself. We all know this famous line. What do we learn from this? This comes up a number of times in Shas. Birur lo mita yafa. Choose a nice death. Okay, even when we're going to kill someone, we're going to kill them as quickly and as best as possible, with the least possible humiliation. So there you have it. That's why we don't do both, because that will be too humiliating. It's enough just to stone her. You don't need to also take her clothes off. To which the Gemara says, okay, wait. So Lema de Rav Nachman Tanaihi, are you saying this is a Tanaitic debate? Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, take her clothes off when she's getting stoned, and the rabbis don't think so. Lo, it's not a Tanaitic debate. It would be hard to say it's a Tanaitic debate. Everybody agrees with it, that you're supposed to kill in the least possible invasive way and the quickest. So what do they say? Everybody agrees with him. Mar savar bizyona adif leitve mitzara degufe, umar savar tzari degufe adif mi bizyon. Before I read this and explain, the first thing to notice is if you don't have clothes on, when they stone you, you'll die quicker because your clothes aren't acting as a buffer, will weaken the effect of anything they do to you. So if you don't have your clothes on, then you'll actually die quicker. And that's why it seems they took their clothes off when they were stoning them. So the rabbis hold, bizyona adifle tzvei mitzara degufa. The humiliation is worse than the tzara of her body. And therefore, we're going to basically end up, we're going to say, right, what did the rabbis say? The rabbis said, we're going to take her, she's not stripped. Why is she not stripped? Because it's more humiliating for her to be humiliated by not having her clothes on. And we want to do the least possible invasive way, which is going to be have her die quicker. I just got confused by it. I'm sorry. Which is going to be bizyone adif leitfe. We'd rather not humiliate her by taking her clothes off, even if it's going to mean a little bit more elongated pain. Okay, it'll take a little longer for her to die, but better that than humiliate her by stripping her down. Umar Savar, Rabbi Yehuda says, Tzara degufe adif leitve mi bizyone. We're more worried about the pain in her body. We want it to go very quickly, so we strip her down as best as we can, not obviously till the end. She's not fully naked, but she's somewhat, and that way she can die quicker. That's more of an issue for her, right? She'd rather the pain of the body is worse than the humiliation she will suffer by being naked, so therefore we go that way. Okay, and that resolved what the debate is between them and why it's different when it comes to lashes, when it comes to death, rather than when it comes to our case of the Sotah. Haytat mechusa levanim. If she was wearing white clothing, then you dress her in black. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, what do you mean? Women often look better in black. Many people wear black. I didn't particularly choose a black shirt today, but maybe subconsciously I did. So now it says, Tana ima yushchorim na'imla mechasinot habagadim mechoarim. If black clothes look nice on her, then they actually give her some disgusting clothes to wear. They really want to make her look humiliated, as we saw through the description in the Mishnah. And I will continue with that description now. She had jewelry, we take it off. To which the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? You say, well, if the whole point is to humiliate her, make her look disgusting, and why would you even need to say this? Obviously, you take jewelry off. Jewelry makes you look pretty. Ma'u detema, you might have thought bahani ili bizioni tfei kid amrei nashe. Maybe it's worse. If you take a lot of her clothes off and you leave her with jewelry, that looks actually the most ridiculous. As it says, kid amrei nashe, like people say, shliach artil, shliach, like take off your artil, Rashi says is alom, you make you naked. Take off your clothes and make yourself naked. V'siyam masane, and wearing shoes. Like that looks ridiculous. If you're naked and wearing shoes, that's preposterous. So maybe you would think it would be worse. She's basically, most of her clothes are off, and yet all she's wearing is jewelry. Maybe that will look the most humiliating. And that's why the Mishnah teaches you no. Take off your jewelry. And then you bring a chevel mitzri. Okay, it's a type of rope. With that, they would keep her clothes up. Rabbi Abba me Rav Huna. What if you don't have a chevel mitzri? Does it have to be specifically a chevel mitzri, or does that mean you can't do the process of the Sotah? So now they're raising, here's the sides of the question. Is it just there so that her clothes don't fall off? Right, whatever they've left of her clothes will stay on. And with a small belt, it will be fine. And therefore ma'ake. Or is it because we want to do what we call midah keneged midah? She did something wrong because she dressed up in nice clothes and a fancy belt, and now we're going to tie this nice string rope around her to basically show her, oh look, this is what we're doing with the things that you dressed up with. And then you specifically need a chevel mitzri because it's making a point. Some little tie, some belt, some string is not really going to be so effective in that way. And therefore, maybe it is ma'akeh. Maybe it prevents us if we don't have it. Amar le Tani Chua says, let's learn it from here. This is the Mishnah. Then we bring chevel mitzri. And they put it right above her breasts, so that her clothes don't fall down. Which seems to make it obvious that the main point is the clothes. Maybe it's got a secondary point, but that's not critical. Okay, now anybody will look and see. And then what did the Mishnah say? Everyone will look and see. It says here, let's just read. Other than her avadim and shfachot. Okay, that was a side point. All the women are allowed to watch her because it says, right? We want to make a show of this, a spectacle. So there's a bit of a contradiction here because it says, this seems to contradict these two lines. It sounds like men or women. The Hadran Tane, then it says, Nashim in, anashim lo. Then it says all the women are allowed to see her. Sounds like just the women are allowed, not the men. Amar Abaye, tirgama, this is a tricky word, nashim. Explain it, that it's referring to in the beginning of that word is not anashim, men, it's an nashim. In other words, explain that line. Anyone who wants to see her means only women. Amalei Rava says to him, what do you mean? But it doesn't say only women, it says anyone, which seems to obviously imply men as well. So El Amar Rava disagrees with Abaye and says, anyone who wants to see can look, but nashim chayavim lirota, but women who are there need to watch this, because v'nivasru kol hanashim v'lo ta'asena kizimat tchena. They won't do like the zima that she did, like this terrible behavior. So for women, this is a real show. And this is really part of this whole thing about Sotah, about being a show for people, a sign for people, stay away from this kind of behavior. So the men can come and watch, but the women really are obligated. How far this obligation goes to what women, it's a good question. New mission. Whatever you mete out, God will mete out to you. Okay? In other words, you get what you deserve. She dressed herself up to sin. So the God dressed her down, right? Made her look disgraceful. She she revealed parts of her body that she shouldn't have in sin. And God revealed what she did. Right? It's a whole public, very public ceremony. The sin started in the yerech, right, between her legs. That's where the action started, and then went up into her body, to her stomach. And that's when the waters affect her body. First, it will start between her legs, and then it will go up to the stomach. Ushar kol haguf lo palat. And even the rest of her body will not escape, because the same way the rest of her body had some enjoyment from the process of the sin, therefore the rest of her body will be affected as well. This is where it says in the pasuk, lampil yerech, and it's of tabitna. I forget exactly the words in the pasuk, but it clearly shows first the yerech, then the stomach. Amar Rav Yosef. Now comes the Gemara and says the following: even though we no longer mete out punishment, we don't have a Sanhedrin anymore that's giving punishment, certainly not death penalties. Well, this whole concept is still existing. How do we know this? Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yosef said this also. Rabbi Chia brought a braita about this. Once the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, even though we no longer have the Sanhedrin, they still didn't cancel the 4 deaths. What do you mean? Of course they did. They don't do the death penalty anymore. The fact that you're liable for death is still there. What does that mean? And now we're going to say God orchestrates things. Someone who should be stoned, which is similar to the way they would stone them. You would fall from the roof, or an animal would attack you. And that was a similar process to when the stoning. They would first throw you off from somewhere, and then they would put rocks on you. So an animal attacking you would be similar. You're supposed to get streifa, which is burning, which they would pour hot lead down your throat. Either you would be caught up in a fire, like burning, because you would get a snake bite, because he would put his poison in you, and the poison would burn your insides. Which is by the sword, because you would be turned over to the authorities. In those days, often they would kill you by the sword, the enemy. Or you could have robbers who come and stab you. If you're supposed to be strangled, where you basically choke to death, where you're drowning in the water, or make which they say is diphtheria, which causes your throat to choke up. Tanya, right? So this is again a way of showing God's hand is operating in this world. Okay, whether that means everybody who died in this way, it doesn't necessarily mean they were liable to death penalty, right? This is a way of the rabbis trying to connect and saying God is right. We don't have everything. Think about the post-Korban, right? Once you're post-destruction, it was very hard for them to function without a Sanhedrin. So they had to believe somehow that God was orchestrating things. Otherwise, it was very hard for them to kind of fill this void of not having a Sanhedrin. Tan Hayah Rabbi Yomi. Another bright. How do we know this? We're now going to quote a bunch of verses. This is a verse in Yeshayahu. Bisas'a b'shalchat terivena. Bisas'a is with like a se'ah, with a full measure, right? You will be sent and it will cause fighting. What this really means, the way they understand this, is God sends a punishment to you in the midah that you did. So, only ela se'ah. Well, this would be a big measurement. So if you do a big sin, you're obviously going to get punished. Minayin l'rabot tarkav v'chatzi tarkav, kav v'chatzi kav, rova v'chatzi rova. We keep getting smaller and smaller measurements. Okay, tirkav and a half a tirkav, a kav and a half a kav, a quarter of a kav and a half and a quarter of a kav, right? Chatzi rova, and tomen v'uchla minayin. Tomen is an eighth of a kav, or an eighth of a log maybe, because rova and chetzi rova is already an eighth. So it's a good question. Exactly, tomen from tam shmone, like shin and taf switch. Like tamnun is an octopus, 8. The uchla is some other very small measurement. Nobody knows exactly what it is. Some people say a 20th. Debate. Talmud lomar ki al kol se'on so'em berash. Truly means every noise in a rash and possibly an earthquake. But what they understand is se'an, se'on. Se'on is like a small version of a se'an. So from there you learn even smaller measurements. You still get punished by God, even if you do small punishments, small transgressions. Let's say you don't get punished for a small thing, but how do you know that they'll collect? God kind of has it. Okay, you did a little something, you're deserving of something. He doesn't yet give it to you, but they all collect and collect and collect, like your pennies. That's what it means, the prutot, the pennies. collect. And in the end, you get to a lot. If you collect a lot of pennies, you'll actually eventually have money. This is a pasuk from Kohelet. One by one, eventually they will make a cheshbon. It'll add up. And the same thing we see by Sotah. And now we're going to have a whole list, which we're only going to start today. The things she did come right back to her. And this, we saw part of this already. She stood outside her door to be attractive to some man. Therefore, she stands, the Kohen stands her up in Shiur Nikanor, where everyone can see her to humiliate her. She put beautiful scarves on her head. He takes her hair covering off and puts it under her legs. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll see further as they go on all the things that she did and what she got as a result. So quick review of our daf. We started off with, she goes in the Shiur Mizrach. How could she be going in the Shiur Mizrach? She was already inside. We make her go back and forth because we want to make her suffer so that eventually, if we draw out this long enough, she'll eventually admit to what she did. Then we talked about how she goes Lifnei Hashem, and then there were other people also in the Mishnah who appear there. We tried to say, okay, the Mitzorah we see, what about the Yoledet? And we say it's just that while her sacrifice is going, she needs to be there, and it actually applies to others as well. It just gave her as an example. Then we said you can't have two sotot at the same time and a whole bunch of other things because of chavilot, packaging things together. You can't do that. Then we saw the Kohen. Basically, now where do we see the source that not only does he uncover her hair, he also takes off her clothes? And we saw there was a machloket about this, which we've seen in the Mishnah. And we tried to compare that to the machloket about skila. And we said it seems to be the opposite. What Rabbi Yehuda holds there is not the same as he holds there. And what the rabbis hold there is the opposite of what they hold there. And the Gemara explained why there's differences between them. We went into all of that. Then we had about her clothes. She should wear black clothes unless black looks well on her. Then she should change that. And all these other things she did to basically make herself look bad. Then we had this chevel. Was the chevel important because we wanted to show, again, this idea that we got into coming up, we just got into now about midah keneged midah. She used this nice belt, so we have to put this belt on hers. It really just to keep her clothes up, whatever's left on her body, so her breasts aren't revealed. And in the end, they say it's clear from the wording in the Mishnah that that's actually what it is. It's really for the secondary reason, and therefore, if you don't have a chevel mitzri in any way to keep your clothes up, it's fine. And then we saw who's supposed to be watching her. In the end, we say it's everybody, just the women are actually obligated, the men, it's optional. Then, and that's because we want to use this as a lesson. And then we started talking about what people do. We'll get back to them, right? They'll be punished for it, even if they don't get punished by court. God will punish them in some way. He has his ways of making sure that the punishments get to the people who are deserving of them. And that was the whole thing we said, and that not only that, but people get punishments according to what they did wrong. And that's what we started saying about the Sotah and all those things. With that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everybody a Chag Sameach.